This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Ash, and Team Valor. Back on board the Resolute, Myax has at last led the heroes to the coordinates of Xenon, as promised, though unfortunately, a problem still remains, that being the fact that the entire quadrant has been artificially blacked out by Azmuth in an attempt to keep away unwanted, which is to say, all visitors. Thankfully, there is one loophole in this, with the Omnitrix's dial beating to turn of its own accord, with Myax concluding this must be functioning like a compass, so that only the wielder of the watch could find its creator. At first, Ben is thrilled by this notion, happy to be useful, though his excitement quickly fades when he learns he'll need to stand on top of the ship to properly guide them, meaning if he misjudges the directions and they have a collision, he'll be turned into space goo, as his suit is not nearly as well protected as the Resolute's hull. In his usual brash way, Kevin claps Ben on the back with his metal hand, telling him not to be such a baby, since this just means he'll have incentive to not mess up. Though clearly still less than enthused, the young Tennyson suggested if it's so easy, why doesn't he come out with him? Smirking, Kevin replies because he doesn't have to, with this putting an end to the whole debate, as Ben dons a spacesuit and begins his walk from the airlock to the exterior of the bridge. While at first this results in something of a rough start, as Ben's confusion over right and left does cause a chunk of debris to scratch deep far on the Resolute's side, he quickly gets the hang of things, guiding the ship to such a point that a secondary homing function of the Omnitrix causes it to light up the quadrant, revealing Xenon at last. However, this is not the only thing it illuminates, as from the gloom suddenly bursts Vilgax's ship, now packed with alien criminals, all of whom are eager to recover the watch for the tyrant and earn their freedom. To this end, several tethered drills are fired into the Resolute, anchoring it and preventing the hero's escape, while over the intercom, the raspy voice of Vilgax orders Ben to surrender himself, or his friends will die. This comes as a distinct shock to the boy, as well as to Gwen and Kevin, as they had all assumed Vilgax was killed in their last encounter. Nonetheless, now is not the time to worry, as with hordes of prisoners and robots storming the ship, they must all band together. Taking up the mantle of leadership, Tetrax orders Gwen and Kevin to stay on the bridge where it's safe, while he and Myax will handle the invaders. Though logically, Gwen points out that 2 against an army isn't very good odds, and if they fall, nowhere will be safe. Not to mention, they've got experience fighting bad guys, so if they all work together, they might at least stand a chance. Though he does not relish the thought of endangering children, Tetrax reluctantly concedes, while having far fewer compunctions about child combatants, so long as they increase her odds of survival. Myax barks at the two to come on, though warns that they better not do anything stupid, since she won't bail them out if they do. The 3 of them then head deeper into the ship, while Tetrax stays just long enough to deploy a pod, ordering Ben not to transform, and instead to get in the pod and return to the ship, since right now, their top priority needs to be keeping him and the Omnitrix out of Vilgax's hands. While a good plan in theory, it fails to take into account one minor detail, that being Ben's desire to be a hero, as knowing his friends are risking his life for him, he cannot turn tail and run, not when he has a plan to get the Resolute untethered from Vilgax's ship, and so climbing into the pod, he does not direct it to the airlock, but instead upwards towards the enemy vessel. Meanwhile, down in the cargo hold, Gwen and Kevin are engaging their first group of prisoners as they begin boarding, with Gwen using her turbo spell to knock them off their feet with gusts of wind, while Kevin clobbers them with his malleable weapon hands. This teamwork proves to be the key to their success, as in contrast, each of the prisoners is only looking out for themselves, and rendering no aid to their allies, as that is time wasted that could be spent recovering the Omnitrix, and receiving a reward from Vilgax. Such selfishness is no match for a pair of friends who have built up a trust and rapport by having each other's backs through a number of dangerous situations, with Gwen repaying Kevin for his help back on Incarsicon, by channeling a blast of pure mana to strike an alien who'd been about to attack the Amalgam Boy from his blind spot, earning her a cry of thanks, as Kevin wallops the last of the prisoners, meaning this part of the ship is secure, and they can move on to another. Deciding to back up Tetrax and Myax, who are in the airlock, they quickly find themselves engaged in battle with a contingent of bioids, though while they are a manageable threat, the same cannot be said of their leader, Volcanus. Recognizing these 2 kids as the punks who sealed him in steel and got him sent to that festering stinkhole of a prison, the Detrovite criminal charges at Gwen and Kevin, and knowing they can't face him in a head-on fight, they run. Though unfortunately, due to still not being used to his heavier body, Kevin is not as agile as he once was, making him the straggler of the pair, and thus vulnerable to a swipe from Volcanus that sends him crashing into a wall as cracks form on his rocky face. Calling out to Kevin in concern, Gwen stops running and begins pelting Volcanus with spells, though cackling maniacally, the orange alien mockingly calls this weak sauce. That is until Gwen smugly informs him that these blasts are meant to bounce off, as she's not aiming for him, she's aiming for... At once, the alarm for the airlock door begins to blare, and knowing what this means, Myax and Tetrax retreat to a safe distance, though unfortunately, it is not quite enough, as catching on at the last second, Volcanus digs his fingers into the floor, keeping him tethered to the ship. That is until a recovered instead Kevin rams his shoulder into his forehead, causing the Detrovite to go plummeting into space with a scream, while Gwen whips out a cord of mana to wrap around Kevin's waist and pull him back to safety, just as Tetrax slams hard on the close button, securing the ship for the time being. Meanwhile, up on Vilgax's ship, Ben begins his own plan to free the Resolute, docking in the shuttle bay and leaping from his pod as he transforms into Gax. Thanks to being Vilgax's own DNA, the resemblance is uncanny, if slightly off. Though trusting most of the people on board to be too scared of Vilgax to look closely, he begins strolling up towards where he hopes he can find the command bridge, all the while wishing he had Gwen with him, as while she's a massive geek, she could probably read the alien signs. As luck would have it, Ben picks the right direction, and so trying to appear casual but also menacing, he orders the bioids at the controls to retract the drills, as they've done their job. Being obedient robots, the bioids proceed to carry out this command, but before they can, one of the high-level prisoners who had deemed storming the ship beneath him pipes up, asking if his boss is sure about that, since then the Petrosapien and the Omnitrix kid can get away. For a second, Ben feels himself sweating, though remembering who he's impersonating, he forces himself to remain calm, as he snarlingly asks if this piece of interstellar trash is questioning him, suggesting that he can show him what happened to the last guy who did that. Having witnessed the real Vilgax's brutality firsthand, the prisoner quickly quails in fear, reiterating Ben's order to release the drill, while apologizing profusely as he retreats to his corner, in the hope the Chimeran warlord will forgive him. Looking over at the video screen, Ben sees that the drills have indeed been retracted, and so turns to leave, figuring that he just has to make it back to his pod in his home free. At once, every eye is upon Ben, and knowing that he's been rumbled, he does the only thing he can: run. Though as he will soon learn, the short legs of a 10-year-old human cannot outpace hardened criminals, with it taking very little time at all before a group of them, led by the one Ben intimidated, tackle him to the ground. While it's not bad enough, all this commotion has drawn the attention of none other than Vilgax as he storms onto the bridge, his red eyes narrowing as he glares down at Ben, and more importantly, at the Omnitrix. In an exultant hiss, the warlord declares that at last the Omnitrix is within his grasp. Though defiant to the last, Ben points out a fat load of good it'll do him, since by transforming into Gax, he's just sped up the self-destruct countdown to a matter of hours, meaning unless Vilgax takes him down to the plant to get the watch fixed, it'll blow up, killing them both and everyone else here. Refusing to have his victory tainted by this child, Vilgax counters that he does not require Tennyson to still be alive to have the Omnitrix repaired. Though keeping his cool, Ben states that for a guy who claims to know a lot about the Omnitrix, he obviously doesn't know about the fail-safes, which he recently learned are there to keep him from dying, so if Vilgeek tries to finish him off, the watch might go into overdrive, and that'd just speed up the self-destruct counter even more. Not to mention tampering with it in this volatile state is more than likely enough to set it off, so like it or not, the Chimera needs to keep him around. Loath though he is to admit it, in this at least Tennyson is right, and so turning to 6-6, who has been tailing him like a bodyguard since they left in Karsakon, Vilgax commands the bounty hunter to keep a close eye on Ben, and kill him if he tries anything, an order the sadistic cyborg is more than happy to carry out, unveiling his extendable gun arms, all of which are pointed at the young human. As this happens, Vilgax watches the Resolute go through the video monitors, having no interest in them now that he has Tennyson, though he does growl at his bioid crew to bring them down to the planet, as he still needs to secure the Omnitrix creator before the other party do, so he can have his prize repaired and extracted, at which point its current wear will become unnecessary. Back aboard the Resolute, spirits are low, as when the transmitter on Ben's pod suddenly goes dead, they are all able to surmise what has happened, with Myax cursing the boy's stupidity, while Gwen and Kevin both demand they have to go and rescue Ben. However, in a level-headed voice, Tetrax replies that while they will, first they need to get to Azmuth and secure his help, while keeping him out of the hands of Vilgax, since if the vile warlord gains possession of both the Omnitrix and the one who knows all its secrets, the universe will be just as doomed as if the watch self-destructs. And so it is that an unharmed Gluto begins bringing the ship in for landing, right outside Azmuth's compound, with Myax leading Tetrax, Gwen, and Kevin inside. However, being an extremely paranoid individual, Azmuth has installed certain security measures, the first of which being a horde of rabid Florana who attack the heroes with pack tactics, while attempting to grab at least one of them and drag them down into the pipes where they will surely meet their end. Unfortunately, like in canon, Gwen is still grabbed, though bellowing that he will not lose her, Kevin lunges forward, transforming his hands into secateurs and slicing at the even more wild vines, forcing them to drop Gwen and allowing her to unleash a Statua spell, which freezes the plant aliens in place. This does leave Gwen feeling rather dizzy and drained, as she has never attempted a spell with such wide-reaching effects before, though thanks to her Keystone of Bezel, she still has enough endurance to keep going, while Kevin puts an arm around her shoulder, telling her she did great, and that he's got her. Together, the team then begin making their way further inside, until finally they come across a reinforced door at the end of a passageway which must surely lead to something important. Rushing ahead, Kevin accidentally triggers a laser tripwire, causing a large hologram of a mechanical figure to burst into life, with Mayax explaining that this is Azmuth. Testily, Azmuth orders the group to go away, expressing no concern at all when they explain what is happening with the Omnitrix and how all life in the universe will end if he doesn't repair it. Churlishly, the creator retorts that he couldn't care less what happens to the universe, and that a clean slate might be for the best. Though refusing to back down, Kevin snaps that his pal is in danger thanks to this jerk's stupid watch, and he's been turned into a monster, so it's time Azmuth do the right thing and fix his mistakes. Though aloof as ever, the hologram replies that actually, he doesn't think he will, before cutting communications. This leaves the heroes in a further state of despair, as if they can't get Azmuth to fix the Omnitrix, what was the point of this trip? Though it seems they will have to ponder that later, as at that moment, the compound shakes from aerial bombardment as the amplified voice of Vilgax announces his arrival, before demanding Azmuth repair and remove the Omnitrix, so that he may begin his conquest of the galaxy. Sharing a look, Gwen, Kevin, Tetrax, and Mayax all wordlessly agree that even if Azmuth is a jerk, they can't let Vilgax have his way, and so stepping through a hole the tyrant's attack has made, the team of 4 face down an army. From a glance, it is plain to see that the odds are against them, as on top of Vilgax himself, there is also the majority of his bioid army, several giant mechadroids, and a legion of the strongest Incarcicon inmates, the worst of all being 6-6, who stands beside Vilgax on a floating platform, with a cuffed Ben at his feet. At the sight of the boy, Gwen and Kevin call out to him, telling him to hang on, though sneering through his breathing apparatus, Vilgax suggests they would be better off worrying about themselves, as he leaps down to the surface, with his horde of minions following him into battle. As one, the small band of heroes rush in as well, with Tetrax firing off crystal shards, Mayax using her pistols, Gwen flinging spells, and Kevin evolving his new morphing powers further, as he merges stone and tadenite to create a spiked mace, which he begins swinging at enemies. Even Gluto joins in on the fight, as having heard the commotion, he flies overhead, using the Resolute's cannons to rain blaster fire down on the villains, putting particular focus on the mechadroids, as they are too large for any of his allies to handle. However, even combined, this is not enough to stem the tide, as each time one of the heroes defeats a foe, 2 more rise to take their place. All the while, Ben watches on helplessly, wishing he could do something, since no matter the cost, it's better than just sitting here and watching his friends die. Sensing this growing turmoil, 6-6 presses a blast to the base of Ben's skull, growling out a threat in an alien language that the boy understands perfectly. Try it, and he'll leave a hole in his head before he can even touch that dial. However, this gives Ben an idea, and so calling out to Gwen and Kevin, he grins that he's going to do that thing they always tell him to. Then, as looks of eager understanding cross their faces, Ben quite literally uses his head, slamming his face into the Omnitrix, and trusting the watch to give him something good. Instead, he gets upgrade. Though being adaptable enough to play even what others might look at as a bad hand, he first uses the Mechamorph's malleable body to slip out of his cuffs and meld with 6-6's armor before causing it to self-destruct, seeing the charred and unconscious body of the cyborg hit the ground, as Ben disengages from the wreckage to instead fuse with the nearest bioid, and then the one after that, and the one after that, leaping from machine to machine, as he instantly reprograms them to turn on Vilgax and his allies, evening the odds a little for the heroes, and allowing him a chance to reunite with his friends as he times out and becomes Ben once again. Rushing up to him, Kevin and Gwen both express relief that he's alright, though another voice is not so charitable, that being Azmuth, who has made his way onto the battlefield, with him snarkily commenting that Ben is a fool, since by using that Mechamorph transformation, he sped up the countdown, which is just further proof that he is unworthy of the Omnitrix. Strangely enough, Ben does not refute this claim, though the same cannot be said for Kevin, who angrily protests that Tennyson may have messed up the Omnitrix, but he's put himself on the line again and again. He's risked his life 100 times for people he doesn't even know, for slobs like him, for jerks like Azmuth. Ben's a hero, and more importantly, he's his best friend. No one is sure what to say in the wake of this unabashed declaration of support, though letting out a deep sigh that he's always had a weakness for the earnest ones. The true Azmuth emerges from the suit, revealing himself to be a Galvan as he clambers onto Ben's wrist and begins fiddling with the Omnitrix before removing the core and thus stopping the self-destruct sequence. As this happens, a scream of pain fills the battlefield, not from anyone being wounded, but from Kevin as he clutches his head. Worriedly, Ben and Gwen ask if he's alright, though beyond speech in this moment, he collapses to the ground, though as he rolls over to look at his friends, it is with a face made of skin, not stone. Seemingly impervious to Kevin's pain, Azmuth states that it must have been the Omnitrix's feedback that was keeping him in his mutated state, though now the watch is deactivated, that should not be an issue. This claim deeply disheartens Ben, as if by saying it aloud, Azmuth has made his situation real. Though looking him firmly in the eyes, Gwen tells her cousin that he's still a hero, even if he can't go hero, a claim Ben attempts to prove true, as despite his loss, he takes the plasma rifle Gwen offers him and leaps into the fray, ready to defend Xenon as himself. Meanwhile, Kevin attempts to do likewise, though it seems fate, or rather Gluto, has a different role in mind for him, as from the Resolute's cargo bay bursts another pod, like the one Ben flew in, and cheering that he loves that goo man, Kevin leaps inside, putting his pilot train to good use as he begins zipping through the air alongside the Resolute, and blasting bad guys left and right. Thanks to this, along with the efforts of Ben, Gwen, Tetrax, and Myax, the enemy army is starting to thin, with Ben having enough room to approach Vilgax, yelling at him to give up, since the Omnitrix is gone, so it's over. But driven as ever, the Chimera retorts that he will take the creator instead, so that he may build him a new Omnitrix, though declaring it'll be over his dead body, Ben opens fire. Unfortunately, mere laser bolts are nothing to one of the most deadly warriors in the galaxy, and so strolling forth, Vilgax makes short work of Ben, swiping once to knock the blaster out of his hand, and then a second time to send the boy flying into a nearby rock, where he slumps, barely hanging onto consciousness. Seeing this, Tetrax attempts to pick up where Ben left off, raining projectile shards down on the Tyrant, only for Vilgax to deliver a punch which almost shatters the crystalline warrior, and takes him out of the fight. The same fate soon befalls Gwen and Myax, though even now, Vilgax is not unopposed, as in spite of his injuries, Ben rises to his feet once more, running at the villain and letting out a mighty roar. However, before the boy can meet Vilgax, and with him certain death, he feels Azmuth leap onto his back, seeing Ben change course, as the creator muses that maybe this Tennyson kid really is worthy after all. Very well, if he's gonna throw his lot in with the boy, he might as well give him something he can use. He then reinstalls the Omnitrix core, and as the green light flashes to life, now with no sign of orange to indicate imminent self-destruct, Ben spots an icon he's never seen before. Trusting this must be what Azmuth was talking about, he hastily slams down on the dial, and for his trouble, he finds himself growing into an alien that makes even the giant mecha droids look tiny. Dubbing this new form way big, Ben then proceeds to make scrap of the remaining robots, while waving at Kevin, who now circles around his head. Though that is not all he does, as when Vilgax makes one last desperate bid for the Omnitrix, Ben picks him up and hurls him into space. And just like that, the battle is over, with the remaining prisoners fleeing or surrendering, while the bioids go inert with no one to command them. This at last allows the heroes to reconvene, with them all being both delighted and amazed they made it out of that fight with no casualties. While Tetrax goes to round up the bad guys who surrendered with a little help from Gluto and Myax, Ben steps aside to speak with Azmuth, thanking him for the new transformation, and offering to return the Omnitrix to him, as it is his after all. However, here the Galvan flatly refuses, stating that he doesn't want it and never designed it with himself in mind. What he always wanted was for it to be wielded by someone who could bring all the people of the universe closer, and clearly, Ben is doing exactly that. Just look at his team. A human, a Petrosapien, a Chimera sui generis, an Osmosian, and an Anodite all fighting together. Having overheard this conversation and noticed one of those names to be unfamiliar, Gwen asks Azmuth what an Anodite is. Though smirking to himself, the Omnitrix creator merely replies that it seems Max is still keeping some secrets, with this being all he says on the matter, as he sets to work building a makeshift spaceship for himself and Myax, having been inspired by the kids to come out of retirement and return to Galvan Prime. With matters all settled here, Tetrax announces his intent to take the kids home, with Ben grinning that after this whole crazy adventure, he could do with a bit of normal, causing Gwen to scoff and ask if he means it, with Kevin emphatically agreeing, stating at this point he'd even take more clothes shopping if it meant a break. Following this, the trip back to Earth is an uneventful one, with the kids all being happy to reunite with Grandpa Max, as well as urging Tetrax to come visit sometime, preferably not for a life-threatening situation. Team Tennyson then all climb into the rust bucket as they get back on the road, and as Gwen sits up front with Max, Ben and Kevin take a seat in the booth, finally having a chance to debrief after all that's happened. In a quiet voice, Ben asks Kevin how it feels to be himself again, commenting that it's a shame he lost his cool shape-shifting powers. Though with a devilish grin, Kevin tells Ben not to be so sure of that, as he lays his hand on the table, coating it in wood, then briefly shaping it into a hammer, showing that he hasn't lost anything, and has instead only grown stronger and more adept with his powers from this experience. And that's where we'll leave things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.